The story takes place a few years ago when I was 12 years old and in the 7th grade. One of my friends, CJ, was bored one weekend, so he just decided to invite me to his house, and obviously I accepted. He also invited one other kid. This kid, Noah, was a big troublemaker at my school. He would never listen to any teachers, and he got into a few fights. Most notably with one of my friends where he threw a heavy rock at the back of his head. Thank God my friend survived and took him down. Also, I don't know why, but he always had an obsession with pure violence. He was a dark kid. The day CJ invited Noah over was, coincidentally, Noah's birthday. So we get to CJ's house, eat, have a bit of fun, and then we go to a lake, cause a bit of trouble like going into the sewer pipes and getting caught. We had fun on the trampoline until I almost got paralyzed doing a front flip, so we went back inside. Also, I would like to mention it was a bit cold outside as it is in the north, so naturally Noah started to get cold. We watched a movie in the basement, but Noah went to sleep in the basement guest bedroom mid-movie because, you know, he was sick. So after CJ and I finished watching the movie, I can't remember the name for the life of me, we went upstairs, talked, gossiped, did 12-year-old stuff. After that, we had to split the bed and go to sleep. This is where the fun sleepover turned south. I fell asleep after about an hour of staring at the ceiling, probably at a crazy hour in the night, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. I remember waking up though, feeling thirsty, so I reach over to the bedside table where I have my water bottle. Before I sit up though, I notice something out of the corner of my eye. On the far corner of the bed, Noah was kneeling on the bed and staring right at me. Mind you, he was supposed to be 3 stories down in the house sleeping. I had not heard the door open or anything like that. Hoping to not cause a scene, I just stayed down and kept my eyes as closed as possible, but open enough so I could see what Noah was doing, and it was almost pitch black in there, so there's no way he could see that my eyes were slightly open. This is when he whispers, "F you." To this day, this gives me the chills, but then I decided to drift off to sleep again. I woke up around 8 a.m., CJ was still fast asleep, but what do you know? Noah is still freaking kneeling in the same exact spot of the bed and looking right at me still. Goodbye. And just like that, after possibly 5 hours of this kid kneeling on the bed and watching me and CJ sleep, he just left the room. I was so relieved that he was gone, and I made sure not to tell anybody what had happened. This kid, he was an absolute psychopath. After this sleepover, I never talked to Noah again, but I always overheard him in class talking about how he worshipped Satan and hated God. He became more and more violent until one day he was just expelled from the school. The reason, apparently, was because he, in a fit of anger, said he would shoot up the school. I never saw or heard of Noah ever again except a rumor that he'd either gone to a school for troubled kids or was homeschooled. So, Noah, who watched me and my friend sleep for 5 hours, let's never meet again. Okay, so this was 4 years ago. At the time, I was 26, also petite and female. I worked in a small tourist town that is motor vehicle free as a licensed massage therapist. I had a client, a barrel-chested white man in his mid-40s who seemed nice, but just seemed to emanate sleazeball. Massage started okay, started with him on his back so that the last half of the massage ended with me working on his back. Pretty typical flow. We chatted a bit, and he said that he was here without his wife, just with a business associate, which does happen a lot, and he was wearing a ring. When he was on his stomach, I noticed him shifting his body a lot. ever the person to give benefit of doubt, I figured maybe he couldn't get comfortable, so I offered more pillows and bolsters, etc., but he declined. Then stayed still for maybe 2 minutes and started up again. It didn't take me long to realize he was grinding himself on my freaking massage table. Just, nope. I should have just ended the session right then, but I never had anything happen like this before. Even creepier, he had this smug little smile on his face and would make a really tiny quiet sigh or moan. Like, no, not proper massage etiquette, so just please stop. He started to get more obvious, and I was grateful that Jack, our stylist, was still in the other room. Finally, I had gotten fed up, but this guy was big and muscly and intimidating, and I was a tiny girl. So I switch and start working the underside of his forearms, a fairly tender muscle, and worked medium pressure on it, and every time he would start to grind, I would put everything I had into the pressure of that tender little muscle and do a mild facial release, which can be quite painful, which was also my point by then as he was getting bolder. He would stop, and I would go back to medium pressure. He would start again, and I would go back to peeling his muscle off of his damn bone. Also a good position for me to pin him with an Aikido right pin, and he wouldn't be able to do anything to me if he tried. By the third time, he caught on to what I was doing, and he stopped. I ended the session and left the room and informed Jack how creepy he was. Jack hung out while I checked the guy out, even though he was now off the clock. Thank you, Jack. Dude comes out to pay, tips me generously, which, ick, and the whole time is staring me down with that smug-ass smile. Finally, he left and I texted my boss, and then he was blacklisted. So I leave from there, have an hour break, and walk to the grocery store where I also work. I had a shift until 12:30 a.m., and as this is a tourist town, usually only locals are in the grocery store, with some exceptions like tourists forgetting something or wanting a snack for their hotel room. So, we're busy, and I'm checking people out when suddenly I feel a hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned, and this creeper is in my checkout cubicle area, employees only, practically breathing down my neck. And I just deadpan glare at him. Before I could ask what the hell he wanted, he stuffs a $10 bill into my hand and whispers, "I forgot to tip you earlier. See you later." Then, grinning smugly and keeping my eye contact, swaggers backward away from me and leaves the store. What the hell? He full knew that he had already tipped me. Now I had a $20 tip total, and I knew he was just trying to get back at me or intimidate me for holding my ground back there at the massage salon. Furthermore, the way the windows are at the grocery, he wouldn't have been able to see me, which means he was either looking for me or he followed me. He hadn't purchased anything. The only other cashier was facing me so I could see the people in her line, which means that he came in and made a beeline directly towards me. He didn't browse because, to do that, he couldn't have come up from behind me. Also, what was with that "see you later" bit? I felt gross. I would have refused the extra tip if I'd had my wits about me, but I had a full line of customers. He'd interrupted me and completely caught me off guard. I texted my boyfriend and he came at midnight to walk me home because we don't have cars where I work. I saw the creeper one more time when I left. He was in a bar. He made eye contact with me and smiled. I was terrified to walk anywhere for the rest of the week that I knew he was there, and didn't feel safe at either of my workplaces. So, creepy dude, don't come back. Or if you do, be sure to bring your wife. I'll have a great deal to tell her. So I'm a stay-at-home mom. I try really hard to keep me and my son entertained by going out and about regularly. Unfortunately, not recently due to the current events. At the time, though, my son was 18 months old, and woke up relatively early every morning, so it wasn't strange for me to be awake before 7 a.m. at the time. That day, I had planned to take my son to the museum because they had an interactive exhibit perfect for kids his age, and I knew he would love it. When he woke up, we ate breakfast, played, and laughed together. But when you're stuck inside a house every day with a toddler, there are just too many hours in the day, and I was ready to start mine. So I pack all of his stuff into the car, and we make our way there. Well, once we arrived, it was closed. Me, being the early bird that I was forced to be, didn't realize the museum didn't open for another hour and a half. We were already out, and I refused to be cooped up inside for another minute, so I decided to head to the playground to kill some time. The park is set up around a giant pond and has a small trail that wraps around it, and the playground is located on the opposite side of it. At this time, it's probably around 8 a.m., so we were the only people there. I pull up to a spot as close to the playground as possible, because lugging a kid around is hard work, and we make our way there. Since it was early, everything was soaked with dew, and I really didn't want my son getting wet, so we decided to head toward the pond to look at the ducks. As we head that way, I noticed a white pickup truck that had a truck cap with blacked out windows parked by the side of the pond. Being the mama bear that I am, and the only ones at the park, I started staring at the truck so he knew that I was aware he was parked there. After a few seconds of me staring, he started to drive and quickly stopped in the middle of the road, a few yards from where he was parked. I thought it was strange, but I wasn't completely concerned at that moment, but I still kept my eye on the truck. There was a parking lot a bit further down from the pond, but still had a visible view of it that he made his way to. By now, I was a bit creeped out, so I decided to cut the park visit short. My son was having a good time, and I felt like I could have been a bit paranoid, so I decided to take my time walking back to the car while keeping an eye on the truck on the opposite end. As we started our walk back, the truck drove off out of sight, so I let my guard down a bit, and after 1,000 toddler steps, we finally made it back to the car. As I'm putting my son in his car seat, I hear another car coming, so I look up, and lo and behold, it's the truck coming straight for my car. I didn't even finish buckling him in when I slammed the door shut and jumped into the front seat, which was thankfully open. I quickly drove off, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, the truck was stopped dead in his tracks in the middle of the road. After driving far enough for me to be sure that he wasn't behind me, I parked and fixed my son's seatbelt. I waited a second to calm my nerves and drove back to make sure the creep wasn't lingering waiting for another person. Thankfully, he was gone. It does give me chills when I think about what could have happened if I wasn't aware of my surroundings, and how easily he could have grabbed me while I was focusing on putting my son in his car seat. What I do know is that I don't stop at playgrounds when no one else is around anymore. Okay, so brace yourself for a long story, but trust me, this stuff is wild. To give you guys some context, 1, this happened to me when I just turned 18. 2, I was extremely sheltered as a child and was very shy and passive, hence my frustratingly naive behavior. And 3, I had never had any encounter like this with an older person, so I didn't know how to respond appropriately. Now I'm older and I definitely know how to stand my ground, but I really consider this the one situation which really changed my perspective on life and people in general. So my story initially starts with me, 18 female, being a guitar player of 6 years. I started in early high school and I loved to play guitar. My guitar teacher was super chill and awesome, but he was no longer able to teach me as he was moving away. I felt like I still wanted to forward my learning, so I decided to look up other available guitar teachers nearby. I didn't have a driver's license back then and my guitar case was too heavy for me to be traveling long distances for a couple lessons a week. I find this one guitar instructor who lived surprisingly close, only 4 to 5 streets away. We contacted, and he agreed to teach me. To give you guys a bit of an idea about this guy, he was a tall, slim white guy. Even though he looked a tad on the scrappy side, you could definitely tell he was strong. He would also mention how he did lots of outdoor sports. He looked to be around his early 40s, but I'm pretty sure he was actually in his mid-30s. He had these big, pale blue eyes, sunken cheeks, and he was balding, but he had a shaved head. So yes, in retrospect, he did look rather disturbing, but I didn't want to go and judge a guy by his looks at our first encounter. On the first lesson, I went to his place with my guitar, but after seeing me play, he told me he couldn't teach me because he only taught beginners, even though I told him that I'd been playing for 6 years. So for the rest of the time, we just jammed, had a chill time together, and then I left. The next day I get a text from him saying he had an old guitar book he wasn't using, and he wanted to give it to me. Earlier that day, I had a huge fight with my sister, so I was eager to get out of the house for a breather anyway. I met him at a halfway point to receive the book from him. After doing so, I said my goodbyes, but as I was leaving, he started to follow me. I was sort of confused at this point, but he just casually held conversations, so I just chatted with him on my way home. We got to my place, I dropped off the book, we played guitar for a bit and just hung out. Suddenly, he started talking to me about a waterfall near his place. I was confused because I had never heard of this place. Why would there be a waterfall nearby? I live in an urban neighborhood. He was super shocked that I hadn't seen it and insisted that we go to see it. Oh, it's only 10 minutes away, I promise. My stupid, naive ass agreed because he promised it was super close. So we headed out to this so-called waterfall, and this is where stuff went downhill. As we were walking to said waterfall, the conversation started to change. He asked what nationality I was, so I told him I was Korean. Suddenly he hugged me super hard, saying, "Oh, I love Koreans." I was bewildered at this point, but I awkwardly let it pass. He started talking about himself, how he dropped out of high school early because he had violent tendencies. He said he threw tables at his teachers and threatened other kids. I let him talk, but inside I was starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I'm constantly checking around the street, but then find there's not a single person nearby to be seen. He continued to ask me uncomfortable things, like if I was a virgin, and how he liked to think about classical pieces in his mind while he had sex. I wish I was lying about this, but I'm not. At one point, he picked up a flower and tried to put it in my hair. I declined, and I pulled away from him. He told me that he liked flowers because he can preserve their beauty even after death. Now, at this point, I'm crapping myself. My heart's pounding. I'm terrified, but I don't know how to tell him that I don't want to go to this waterfall. It's been 20 minutes at this point, and no such place to be seen. I constantly asked him where the waterfall was, and he would just brush it off, saying, "Oh, we're almost there." Eventually, after 30 minutes of walking, we get to a random bush track. I'm beyond uncomfortable at this point, and my mind is racing for any excuse not to go in. I suddenly spotted a guy coming out of the bush track, and let me tell you, I could not have been more relieved to finally see another human. I sent the guy a huge pleading look, and he seemed perplexed. He glanced over at my guitar teacher, but didn't say anything and left. My heart sank. Now, let me tell you, the guy actually wasn't lying about the waterfall. It really did exist, but who even gave a crap at this point? I'm alone in a place that I'm not familiar with a guy who is saying some really scary things. I let him walk ahead whilst behind my back I began texting my older sister to call me ASAP. My phone rang, so I answered the call. My sister was on the line saying, "What the hell is going on? Are you still with that guy? Where are you?" I just faked a wobbly smile and said, Hey, Hey, what's up? What? Oh, you want me to come home right now? It's an emergency? Okay. Meanwhile, the guitar dude is watching me carefully. I told him that I needed to leave, and suddenly his facial expression changed. Why? He said in a low, intimidating way. His demeanor changed 180, no longer smiling. Why do you have to do what your sister tells you? His big pale eyes were unblinking. I kept insisting that it was an emergency, but he was not budging one bit. He started demanding that the waterfall is literally right there and we are so close. At this point, the bush track we had walked was sloped downward. I was wearing a pair of boots at the time, but was constantly slipping as we ventured down. It had eventually dawned upon me that even if I were to run, it was most likely that I would either slip or he would catch up to me very easily. Inside, I'm freaking out like crazy, because I honestly have no idea how to get back, so eventually I decide the best thing to do is just agree and get this over with. I weakly agree that we can see this goddamn waterfall, only for 5 minutes max, and then I needed to leave. He suddenly changed back to all cheery again, and he was leading me again down towards that waterfall. By now, I have thoughts that I might actually die here. If he were to harm me in any way, there would be no one to hear my cries. So when he wasn't looking, I started taking pictures of my surroundings, random parts of the bush track, some distant rocks, because my thoughts were, if I were to get murdered here, then maybe, just maybe, the police might find this phone and trace me. There are no words to truly express that feeling of, I am going to be murdered. If anything were to happen, would my family ever be able to find me? No one would ever suspect to look in a place like this. At this point, the sky was getting dark and the guitar guy insisted on making a fire near the waterfall. I just agreed. He made a small fire and we sat in silence staring at the flames for a bit. I heard a small sigh beside me, but continued to stare at the fire. After the third sigh, I glanced over at him, and he was staring at me straight with his huge, unblinking eyes, the flames making a disturbing shadow over his smiling face. He stayed like that for a solid 15 seconds, and then began to scoot over closer and asked if he could give me a massage. I told him no, but he then asked if I was cold and tried to cuddle me, so I stood up and said 5 minutes was up and I needed to leave. He seemed satisfied that we did spend some time at the waterfall, so he agreed to take me home. The whole time back, he was constantly nudging me and asking me why I was so quiet. I was beyond traumatized to answer. He forced his arm in mine and we linked arms all the way home. It suddenly started to rain and he just paused and forced me to face him. He then asked me if he could kiss me. For once, I looked him straight in the eye and said no. He seemed offended and asked why not. It's just a kiss, it doesn't mean anything. I told him no again and he let go. We were almost at my house, finally, before he stopped and said, well, this is yours. For a second I was confused, but realized he mistook my house for a couple blocks down. I just nodded and said goodbye to him. I walked in the driveway into the front door and waited until he was definitely gone before I bolted all the way home. My sister answered the door furious and demanding to know what the hell happened and why I didn't answer her 50 missed calls. I didn't even have the energy to say anything. I just went upstairs to the bathroom, took a scathingly hot shower, and scrubbed my body clean 3 times. I know this story is extremely long, but trust me, this wasn't even all the creepy crap this guy said to me. He continued to send me messages and call me, but I ignored them. He began to grow angry and demanded for his book back. I eventually told one of my friends who was mortified at what happened. She said to just ignore his calls. I did have a little comfort in the fact that he thought I lived a couple houses down, but was terrified every time the doorbell rang, as I pictured one of my family members answering it to find him at the door with a knife to kill us all. My friend had insisted on going to the cops, but what was the point? I was 18, legal age, and technically he didn't do anything illegal. After I blocked his number, that was the last I had ever heard from him. It took me another 5 years to recover from the trauma, though I never recovered completely. Okay, so sharing this story is really embarrassing because I was 15 at the time and had absolutely no self-confidence or respect for myself at the time. I was always a really awkward girl in school and never could find a boyfriend since I was bullied pretty bad and didn't get along with anyone really in my school. One of my friends suggested that I joined a dating app, so I did. I would never message anyone because I was so scared of rejection, so I just waited for people to come to me. Eventually he did. He was super charming at first. We both were super into Pokemon, My Chemical Romance, witchcraft, conspiracy theories, etc. We also both bonded over the fact that we had broken homes. The first time we met, we just talked for hours. He ended up asking me to be his girlfriend the first day we met in person, which I thought was odd, but I was a desperate kid and he seemed nice. The first red flag was a couple months in. I found a text log with him and some other girl. He was basically telling her he thought she was hot and asking if she had liked him. I was really upset, but he said he didn't remember sending that and he doesn't know why he would do that. That was the start of this constant excuse. So I forgave him and we moved on. Things were pretty happy until about 6 months in. I had gotten into some drama with my friends and I wanted a break. He suggested we start hanging out with his friends who happened to be his only friend. Let's just call him D. D always creeped me out. His grandma was on a breathing machine, and he would still smoke in the house and set random things on fire, even though it could blow the house up. He would rob people and joke about killing others. I just tried to chalk it up to him being an edgy kid trying to act gangster, as many in my city do. One day I was over at D's house with my boyfriend and my ex, and D was acting scary as hell. There was a point where I thought my boyfriend slapped my ass, but I could tell it wasn't his hand and it wasn't him from where he was sitting. He let D do that. My boyfriend asked D for an old game system and he said, "Only if I can screw your girl." My boyfriend quickly replied and said, "No, yeah, I don't care," so nonchalantly that it made me sick. I kept saying no over and over again, and both of them tried to convince me to have a three-way. I started having a panic attack and saying I didn't want to. D just asked, "Well then can I watch?" I was shaking my head and thinking if I should text my dad to come get me. I froze up. My boyfriend just took advantage of me, but I couldn't move. After everything was done, I went home shaking. I called him and screamed at him, telling him what happened was wrong, but I still stayed. I wish I hadn't. Him and D ended up not being friends anymore because I found out they had actually had sex. The next year of our relationship was basically constant fights, mistrust, and it really started to mess up my relationship with my family and friends. They all hated him, but I was just blind to it. He was honestly terrifying. As our relationship progressed, he would tell me his fantasies of killing people, how he wished he could just give it all up and live his dream of being a serial killer. He had a really weird obsession with role-playing creepypasta characters. He told me how he got accused of touching an 8-year-old, but how he would never do that, and that his dad got him out of it. He told me how he wondered if his dad would ever get him out of things again, although he did have a horrible relationship with his dad who was super creepy in and of himself. At one point, his dad came to me begging me to believe him that my ex was trying to kill him by putting bleach on his toothbrush. Yeah, that was crazy. He had a foot fetish, which I try not to kink shame, but he would make me feel really uncomfortable and touch my feet when I didn't want him to. I resented him honestly, but I stayed with him. I don't know why, and I beat myself up for it every single day. We finally ended a year and a half in on my 17th birthday. I wanted to have a good couple of days. My dad rented out a nice room in a hotel with a hot tub. I was gonna get drunk with all my friends and have a good time. I honestly just didn't want him to come over. Our relationship was really rocky at this point, and I was starting to realize that I deserved better. But again, he fake cried and begged me to let him come. The first night was mostly okay, but he seemed really touchy with one of my friends, M. She asked if he was trying to sleep with her, but I told her it was probably nothing. I wish I listened. The second night made me open my eyes. Two of my friends that are a couple left, which left me with only my ex and M, and we were all incredibly intoxicated. M was laying on the ground with her legs in the air, inebriated. I saw my ex get out of the bed, walk over to her, and suck on her toes for a second. Right in front of my eyes. I was fuming. I walked over to him, grabbed him by his shirt, and dragged him into the bathroom. I started screaming at him about how he just sexually assaulted my friend in front of my own eyes and cheated on me yet again. He was denying it at first, even though I saw it with my own eyes, until he started vomiting and I went to leave the room. He admitted it and begged me to stay. He told me he couldn't live without me and even started crying. I have never been abusive, but let me tell you, I slapped the shit out of him, and I left him in the bathroom sick so I could try to have a good rest of my night. Long story short, we broke up, and I found out he was still assaulting girls even after we broke up, which just makes me sick. After we did break up, I realized how freaking stupid I was. I was traumatized, and I honestly still am. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. In my head, when I was with him, I thought I was doing God's work. I thought I could fix him. I'm broken, so this just must be what I deserve, right? Well, I'm 18 now and in a much healthier relationship. I'm in therapy and working on all my trauma, and I just wanted to share my story. Hey there, friends. I hope you enjoyed this collection of horrifying encounters. Maybe enjoyed is the wrong word, but I'm going to keep it because I can't think of anything else to say there. I would like to say that whenever I do these stories, and it comes up a lot whenever I talk to people who I ask if I can do their stories, I don't necessarily just do them for the entertainment value. Yes, my channel is an entertaining one, and that's kind of the sole purpose, but there is also a sense of education with these stories, especially the creepy encounter ones like this. If anybody can listen to these stories and think, wow, this can happen to anybody, and it keeps them out of a dangerous situation, then I've done the right thing. That's all. Just wanted to point that out there. If you did enjoy these videos and you would like more content like this, please do consider joining the Nevermore. To join the Nevermore, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button and the bell next to it to get notified of all the videos I drop, and I do drop a lot of videos. In order to support the Nevermore, you can do things like me on Facebook, join my subreddit, follow me on Twitter, and support me through Patreon and Ko-fi. All of these things support the Nevermore and help it grow. This channel's been growing steadily, and I could not be more excited for the future, honestly. Also, I would also like to point out, this is the first video with this new microphone, so if it sounds weird, I haven't tweaked it all the way yet, but it should sound good based on what I've been listening to. Hopefully, it sounds good to everybody else. The volume is a lot louder on this microphone, which was an unintended side effect, so anyway. I forgot to mention there is a link down there where you can submit a story to me if you have one for me to read. Please do take advantage of it if you have one. All that said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic day and a fantastic week. I love you all. I will see you on the next video, but until then, sleep well.